science unlock the secrets of the paranormal? Our mission is to unravel the mysteries of the spooky, but we do it through the lens of science and not sensationalism. We are Mount Washington Valley Spirit Paranormal Investigators. We're committed to exploring the techniques used in the field, always prioritizing critical thinking, often finding natural explanations for seemingly paranormal events. And now, here's the host of the Mount Washington Valley Spirit Podcast, Eric Extreme.
Hello, and thank you for joining me on the Mount Washington Valley Spirit Podcast, dedicated to exploring what is perceived as paranormal activity through a scientific lens. I'm your host, Eric Extreme. Today, we're going to examine a concept that often arises during paranormal investigations. We will be discussing synchronicity, the experience of two or more events that appear meaningfully related but are not causally connected. It's often described as a meaningful coincidence. These events can be thoughts, feelings, dreams, or external occurrences. The person experiencing the synchronicity perceives a connection between these events that is significant to them personally, even if there's no logical reason for them to be linked. For example, there may be a sudden drop in temperature or a gust of wind when someone focuses on a particular person or memory. Another example is someone returns home on their deceased spouse's birthday and finds a picture of them that has fallen on the floor. A third example is that within a few days, a person sees the numbers representing the birthday of a deceased friend on a digital clock, a license plate, and an order number on a receipt. Some people might link these coincidences together to paint a picture that it is a sign from a lost loved one. So our goal today is to define what people actually mean by synchronicity and explain why this effect seems to appear so often in paranormal cases. Let's start by defining what synchronicity actually is. At its core, synchronicity is the feeling that two or more events are connected by meaning rather than by a direct cause and effect relationship. The link often feels very strong in the moment. It's highly personal and subjective. The key elements are often quite simple. Timing that feels particularly special or significant, content that seems directly relevant to a question or memory, and a sense of surprise that triggers an emotional response. The events themselves can be tiny, a single word, a number, or a fleeting image. The sense of meaning is what does the heavy lifting, transforming an ordinary coincidence into something extraordinary. Why does synchronicity seem to show up so frequently in life? Well, life often creates rich environments for chance overlaps to occur. We ask a lot of questions, juggle several tasks simultaneously, and often find ourselves surrounded by reminders of the past, important dates, and meaningful symbols. We're constantly bombarded with information, the time displayed on our phones, news headlines scrolling by, notifications popping up, stories from those around us, tasks to complete at work, etc. The world breathes, society hums, and the environment adds its own mix of sounds and sights. Add to all of this a strong desire to find meaning, and you have a perfect engine for generating striking coincidences. The longer you live and the more you experience, the more impressive these overlaps are likely to feel. How does the human mind actually link these seemingly disparate events together? Well, the human brain is fundamentally a pattern-finding machine. It prefers order over chaos and meaning over randomness. Part of this ability comes from the specialized regions like our fusiforms gyrus, which helps us recognize faces and familiar patterns, even in random shapes or visual noise. This tendency, called pareidolia, can make us see meaning or intention where there isn't any, like spotting faces and shadows or figures in static. When you hold a specific goal or idea in mind, your attention naturally shifts towards anything that seems to support it. For example, if you learn a new name, you suddenly start noticing that name in songs, advertisements, and conversations for the next week. This is known as the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon, or frequency illusion. When you're thinking about a particular topic, you'll likely notice anything related to that appears in your daily life. Memory often plays a significant role. You tend to remember the connections that resonate with you while forgetting the ones that don't. Over time, your perception can become filled with meaningful coincidences, while the less significant details fade from memory. In short, when you're intensely focused on something, your brain actively seeks out and emphasizes related information while downplaying or forgetting anything that doesn't fit. Numbers can feel mysterious. Yet our daily lives are full of repeating numerical patterns that can feel like synchronicity. For example, you might consistently notice the time 11:11 on digital clocks, or repeatedly encounter the number 7 in addresses, phone numbers, or prices. You may find yourself frequently on channel 33 when flipping through the television stations, or you keep receiving confirmation codes that contain the number 9. These recurring numerical patterns can create a sense of connection or meaning in everyday life. It's almost inevitable that some of these numbers will align in ways that feel tailored to the case. In a paranormal investigation, random noise can flow through a site, even when we're trying to keep things quiet. The wind might whistle through cracks in the walls, creating eerie tones known as Helmholtz resonances. A loose shutter might bang rhythmically against a window frame. Pipes might groan and creak as water flows through them. A team member might whisper something to another team member. Even a heating system can breathe with a rhythm that suggests certain syllables. The brain then turns those rhythms into short words, especially yes and no, and then a story favors a particular name. Any similar sounding word can take on added weight. Once a suggestion has been spoken aloud, agreement among the group tends to grow quickly. When people are together, the feeling of synchronicity can become even stronger. Imagine someone in the group finds an old document with a specific name on it. Later, they think that they hear the voice say the same name, even though it was just the building settling. One person might point out this perceived connection or coincidence because they really think that they heard the name, and it's not just a creaky building. And others will naturally want to support the interpretation. Confirmation bias then helps to preserve what fits the narrative and discard what doesn't. The clustering illusion leads us to treat random clusters of events as if they were intentionally designed. The Texas sharpshooter effect causes us to draw the target after the shots have been fired, circling the hits and ignoring the misses. And the availability heuristic makes the most vivid example feel both common and likely. It's important to remember that none of this requires bad faith or intentional deception. It's simply how our minds tend to behave under conditions of uncertainty and with shared goals. However, it's important to remember that group dynamics and cognitive biases can amplify these feelings of connection. For example, if one person suggests a particular interpretation, others may be more likely to agree, even if the connection is tenuous. Confirmation bias can lead the group to focus on information that supports the interpretation, while downplaying anything that contradicts it. And the availability heuristic may make the most vivid example seem more common and meaningful than it actually is. Therefore, it's crucial to approach these shared experiences with a healthy dose of skepticism. So, how do you guide clients who are experiencing potential synchronicities during a paranormal investigation? First, help them examine the source of the perceived connection. Is it based on a precise observation or more of a subjective feeling? Second, explore the likelihood of such an alignment occurring by chance, given the environment. And third, gently explain how cognitive biases can amplify the sense of meaning. By exploring these factors together, you can help clients develop a balanced perspective on their experience. To illustrate how these principles play out in real world scenarios, let's examine a few case studies. These examples highlight how easily coincidences can be misinterpreted as paranormal events, especially when emotions are heightened and personal connections are involved. By analyzing the details of each case, we can identify the normal forces at play and offer a more grounded perspective of the experiences. Case Study 1: The Cookbook, the Robin, and the Broken Clock. So there is a client who is really freaked out. They're convinced their deceased grandmother is trying to send them a message from beyond the grave. And what's the evidence? Well, it's a series of seemingly random things, but each one connects to the grandma. First, grandma's old. Handwritten cookbook falls off the shelf. Then a robin, grandma's favorite bird, keeps slamming into their window. And finally, their grandfather clock stops at exactly 3:17 a.m., which, get this, is the time their grandmother passed away. Spooky, right? The client's piecing it all together, thinking it's a deliberate message, maybe even a warning. But we gotta look at the facts. Turns out the bookshelf was a mess, totally overloaded, and the support bracket was bent. The cookbook, being old and heavy, was teetering on the edge. The robin? Just a local bird being territorial, seeing its reflection and going nuts, and it just happened to be the same kind of bird that the grandma loved. And the clock? It's an old antique that always acts up, and there was a power surge early in the morning when the clock stopped. So, yeah, it's a coincidence. A series of random events when you're grieving, and those things that are tied to your loved one can feel like something more. But in this case, it was just life happening. Case study 2, their song, the number 13 and the static. This client was convinced she was dealing with an intelligent haunting, and it was all tied to a past trauma with her late husband. She kept hearing the song they danced to at their wedding on the radio, everywhere she went. Then the number 13, the day that her accident happened, started popping up all over the place on receipts, license plate, you name it. And to top it off, she was getting crazy static on their old cathode ray TV with bunny ear antennas whenever she tried to watch their favorite show, which they always watched together. She was convinced it was some malevolent entity messing with her, trying to upset her for its own entertainment. Creepy, right? But the investigator dug a little deeper. The song, it was a popular wedding song, playing on many stations. The number 13, well, that's likely the beta Meinhof phenomenon, also known as the frequency illusion. After the accident, she was more attuned to the number and started noticing it everywhere, making it seem far more prevalent than it actually was. And the static, just a loose cable and some interference from a cell tower, and the timing with the show was just by chance, as she watched very little TV. So in the end, it wasn't a haunting. It was anxiety, a past trauma, and a little bit of bad luck all mixed together. Case study 3, the lavender, the candlelight, and the lost locket. This one was heartbreaking. The client believed their deceased spouse was trying to reach out to them. They'd catch a whiff of the spouse's favorite lavender perfume, see a quick flash of candlelight, because they were always ate dinner by candlelight, out of the corner of their eye. And then, one day, they found the locket that their spouse always wore, containing a picture of them in a peculiar place. They were taking it as a sign, a message of love and reassurance from beyond. Of course, we had to investigate. The lavender smell, it was just lingering in an old scarf that hadn't been touched in ages, and the client had just been cleaning out the closet, stirring up the scent. The flash of light, phosphenes are those little flashes or patterns of light you sometimes see when you rub your eyes or when you're really tired or stressed. It's basically your brain misinterpreting signals and creating a visual hallucination. The client was tired and stressed. In the locket, it had just fallen behind a piece of furniture and got kicked out during cleaning. It's tough because you want to believe, especially when you're grieving, but sometimes it's just your mind playing tricks on you, trying to find comfort in the everyday. Case study 4, the Gettysburg Dream, the number 23, and the cold room. This client was convinced their new house was haunted. They had a super vivid dream about the Battle of Gettysburg, a place their family visited every summer. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, they started noticing the number 23 everywhere, on license plates, in addresses, and even as the page number in the book their son was reading. To top it off, they were getting these sudden cold spots in the room where they kept their collection of Civil War memorabilia. They were sure it was connected to the house's history, some restless spirit hanging around. So, the investigator did their homework. They looked into the house's history and surrounding area, everything. There was no direct connection to Gettysburg. As for the number 23, it turned out to be the jersey number of their son's favorite baseball player, and he was constantly talking about it, which explained why they were noticing it everywhere. Case study 5, the old photograph, the feeling of regret, and the radio static. This client was convinced they were getting messages from a deceased relative, and it was manifesting in a series of unsettling ways. First, they discovered an old photograph of their relative, taken at a specific park they never visited together. Immediately after finding the photo, they were overwhelmed by a feeling of deep regret, a sense that they had missed a significant opportunity with their relative. Then, every time they drove near that specific park, their car radio was explicitly filled with static, even though reception was usually clear. They were sure it was their relative trying to communicate some unfinished business related to that location. But the investigator had to approach it skeptically. The old photograph? It turned out the relative had been involved in a community project at the park years ago, something the client had forgotten. The feeling of regret? The client was approaching the anniversary of their relative's death, a time where such feelings were naturally heightened. The radio static? A new cell tower had recently been installed near the park, and other residents had reported similar interference. While the client found comfort in the idea of a message from beyond, the evidence pointed to a combination of forgotten memories, grief, and technological interference. Building upon our exploration of synchronicity in paranormal investigations, let's address some common misconceptions that can cloud our judgment. One misconception is the idea that if something feels like a significant coincidence, it must have a non random cause. The problem with this is that people naturally look for and assign meaning. Even purely random events can seem significant if they fit a pre existing belief or narrative, especially if the criteria for what counts as an alignment are flexible. Another misconception is that rare or unusual events are automatically evidence of paranormal activity. While a truly unique event might seem paranormal, statistically, rare events happen all the time when you conduct enough tests or observe enough different things. The sheer number of opportunities increases the likelihood that something unusual will occur by chance alone. Finally, there's the misconception that if everyone on the team agrees that something paranormal happened, it must be real. Group consensus doesn't guarantee accuracy. People in the groups can unintentionally influence each other, leading to a shared belief that isn't based on solid evidence. This is why blind reviews are so critical. They help prevent group suggestion from shaping the interpretation of the data. It's also important to remember the ethical considerations involved in these investigations. You'll often meet clients who get comfort from personal symbols that harm no one. It's important to respect that. You can let them keep their personal comforts while still keeping your casework separate and disciplined. Your job is to prevent unnecessary fear and to prevent fragile moments from hardening into false evidence. When you speak with care and empathy, you can build trust that allows people to accept a normal explanation without feeling mocked or dismissed. So, how can you approach claims of synchronicity in a paranormal investigation while maintaining objectivity? The key is to balance an open mind with a healthy dose of skepticism. When someone reports a striking coincidence, resist the urge to jump to paranormal conclusions immediately. Instead, consider whether the apparent connection might be due to a chance, selective memory, or the natural human tendency to find patterns, even where none exist. Try to define the specific details of the event as clearly as possible, and ask yourself, how likely is it that this would have happened anyway? Could there be a natural explanation? Try to gather additional evidence to support or refute the claim. But be careful not to let your own biases influence your interpretation of the data. Remember, the goal is to understand what actually happened, not to confirm a pre-existing belief. Our job as investigators is to find the truth, not to force a perception of the spooky because we wish to see the situation through that lens. In short, synchronicity is the feeling of a meaningful connection between events that aren't causally linked. It's most often experienced in complex situations where we're already looking for patterns. By remaining objective, acknowledging the role of chance, and consistently considering natural explanations, we can help clients understand these experiences without jumping to unfounded conclusions. This approach promotes responsible investigation and builds trust. Remember, synchronicity is a fascinating phenomenon, but it's essential to approach it considerately. By understanding the psychological factors at play and exploring natural explanations for the perceived synchronicity, we can help people make sense of these experiences while respecting the client's interpretation. This has been the Mount Washington Valley Spirit Podcast. Thank you for your curiosity and for bringing an open mind and a scientific guide to the paranormal. To help you on your journey, remember to balance wonder and skepticism when exploring perceived anomalous phenomena. Thank you for listening.
Science has been, and always will be, the key to unlocking the mysteries of the paranormal. Don't be fooled by the shadows. Seek the light of reason. Remember, trust no one until rationality has exhausted all logical possibilities. I want to believe that science must be your guide, because the truth is out there, just beyond the veil. Until next time, stay skeptical.
Thanks for joining us on the Mount Washington Valley Spirit Podcast. We hope you'll continue to explore the scientific side of the unexplained with us. Eric is authoring a book, which you can check out at www.apparitionofthepast.com. But before you go chasing shadows, remember that science always comes before the spooky.